Something new. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am the executive director and host of Courage to Live Your Dream podcast and TV show. We are on the Raven International Media Network. We're also a part of Amazon Fire and Roku. You can find us there, and soon we will be on Apple TV. Our show is about helping you. We are here to support you on your destination to your dreams. And we know how lonely it can be when you are go to take a new challenge. There's something about the self-talk that comes into your head that tries to convince you you're wasting your time. Our guests are people who have gone on the same journey you are taking, and they offer advice, suggestions, tips to help support you and keep you motivated. We are blessed today, and I say blessed because we have a man who's going to help us in this day and age, what we're going through. We need to have someone like him share some great advice and wonderful tips on what we can do in order to survive. Our guest is Rennie Gabriel, and Rennie, well, he failed at high school math. And as he said, it made sense that at age 50, after two divorces and a business that failed, that he would find himself flat broke. Setting aside all his financial education, he started on a quest to find out how the wealthy became wealthy. Unlike the rest of us who would sit back and wallow in a pity, he took a journey learning and applying their three secrets that allowed him to become a multimillionaire in less than 10 years while earning only $5,000 a month. Rennie is the author of the award-winning best-selling book, Wealth, Wealth on Any Income, and that has been translated into 8 languages. He now donates 100% of the profits from his book, online programs, and coaching to charity, primarily sheltertosoldier.org. So, Rennie, with a resume like that, please tell us some of well, you know how we all think that only the wealthy can get wealthy, and there's really nothing the rest of us can do to even get any a percentage of what they have. Can you dispel some of those beliefs that we have about money?
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many myths that are perpetuated in society that keep us broke. And hopefully, I'm getting an echo back, and hopefully this isn't showing up the same way on your side. Tell me how it sounds on your side.
There's no echo, but there's a little bit of static.
Okay, well, hopefully your listeners can deal with a little bit of static. So I guess the best place to start, instead of talking about what myths that we believe in, I'll start with how we are conditioned to believe that only the poor are the kind and noble, and the wealthy are heartless and greedy, because that's one of the most important things that gets in the way of our creating financial solvency or security or wealth and becoming philanthropic or having financial freedom, whatever you want to talk about. And well, I'll list all of the areas that we get this input, and then I'll give you some examples. So it's Hollywood movies, it's TV shows, it's books, it's the scripture, it's fairy tales, all of which give us that impression that only the rich, that only the poor are kind and noble. So I'll give you an example of a couple movies, one of them being Titanic. You've got Jack in the bowels of the ship, and he's happy, and Mary, who is up at the stateroom with her rich boyfriend who's disgusting, and Jack is the happy one, and he's partying, and he wins Mary's favor because he's the poor and noble, and her fiance is just dreadful. Okay? These are subconscious images that we're getting. You've got Jimmy Stewart in A Wonderful Life, who has his money. His uncle ends up making a mistake, leaves $5,000 that has to be deposited on the bank counter. And the guy in the wheelchair, Mr. Potter, steals the money. He's the rich guy in the town. And he's evil. He's heartless. He's disgusting. And he tries to drive the bank, the savings and loan that Jimmy Stewart heads, out of business. So Jimmy Stewart is poor. He's the kind and noble. So that's an example of a couple movies. You've got Sundance. You got, the Sundance Kid. Oh, my mind is failing me because of my age. But you've got a TV show. You've got the Starks versus the Lannisters on the Game of Thrones. You've got in fairy tales, Jack and the Beanstalk, and I'll talk more about that. You got books by Charles Dickens. You've got several examples from the scripture, like a camel can pass through the eye of a needle easier than a rich man can get into heaven. So many places you turn. So let's look at a fairy tale. We're indoctrinating our children with it's okay to kill rich people if you're poor. Look at the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. He plants these beans, the beanstalk grows up into the clouds, and that's where the giant is, who has the golden eggs and the goose that lays them and the singing harp. And so Jack steals the golden eggs. He steals the goose that lays the golden eggs. The giant chases him, and as he's coming down the beanstalk, Jack cuts it down, and the giant falls to his death. So the moral of the story is it's okay to steal from the rich and kill them because you're poor. People don't see that as the moral, but that is what happened. So the first myth is to understand we've been indoctrinated since childhood to believe that only poor people are good. And when you look at what goes on in the world, the biggest philanthropists happen to be the wealthiest people on the planet. You've got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You've got the Bloombergs donating millions of dollars, on and on and on. Warren Buffett's giving his billions to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation because of the good work they do in education and health around the world. If you look back in history, you've got Andrew Carnegie, who says the only purpose of accumulating wealth is to give it away. And he built libraries all around the world. He gave away 90% of his fortune before he died, which in today's dollars is the equivalent of 300 billion with a B. So first thing we want to recognize is how we've been indoctrinated. Now, what are some of those myths? Well, some of those myths are the idea that we need to pay off debt before we can save or invest. Hey, I owe money on a credit card. I have to pay it off before I can do anything for myself. Well, there's a 5,000-year-old secret in a book called The Richest Man in Babylon that says, before you pay anyone else, you have to set aside 10% for yourself. And if people are spending everything on paying off their debts and their rent and their mortgage payment or their utilities and their food, they say, well, I can't save anything because there's nothing left after I pay my bills. Yes, because you put yourself last in line. People need to treat themselves like they deserve to own some of the money they're earning. And the only way that can happen is by being first in line. And that's what I did when I was broke at age 50. I'm only earning $5,000 a month. I set aside $500 a month so that I could invest and ultimately wouldn't have to worry about eating cat food at age 65.
Well, obviously you don't do that.
Yes, no, it's turned out much better than that.
So what is the difference between good debt and bad debt?
Well, bad debt is consumer debt. It's paying for meals on your credit card if you can't pay the balances in full. It's carrying a balance from month to month on a credit card. Going out to eat and converting, you know what you convert the food into the next day?
Mhm.
But if you're carrying a balance, you're paying it off for, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. That doesn't make any sense when you disposed of it the next day. So
So would you suggest that people have one credit card? Or,
it
I know
doesn't,
most people have several, you know?
yeah. And it doesn't matter if it's one or several, it's paying off balances in full each month.
Mhm.
And if you can't do that, what is needed is to set up a spending plan, not a budget. I don't believe in budgets. Budgets bring up the idea of lack and sacrifice and deprivation. So, what I have people do is create a spending plan, which means you spend money in alignment with the goals that you've set up. And I've
Mhm.
got a spending register that allows people to track where they're spending their money and in 5 to 10 seconds to see if it's in alignment with their goals. Or
Mhm.
if they spent money that they wouldn't have spent if they didn't have to work for a living. Or, I mean, well, I get, I'm not sure this is a myth, but I'll talk about what wealthy people do when they hear familiar information.
Mhm.
And I'm talking about a 5,000-year-old secret called pay yourself first. And some of your listeners might say, oh, I've heard that before, or I know that, or maybe even I've done that. Ordinary people, when they hear familiar information, make statements.
Mhm.
Someone with a wealthy mindset asks questions instead when they hear familiar information. They'll ask a question like, well, how does that apply to me? Or how will I start that? Or where could I do that? Or what do I need to do to get started? Or who could support me with this? I mean, questions like what, when, where, or how. They'll ask those questions, and that brings up the solutions or the actions they need to take to produce the results they want. And one of the things that you said is, as a myth, I need to earn more money. No,
Mhm.
I thought that. I thought if I earned more money, everything would work out, because it seemed like whenever I earned more money, I was spending more than I was earning. I was always living past what I was earning. And what I finally discovered was that you have to look at your expenses first and your income second. And when I did that, everything turned around and started to work better. So there's something else. Okay.
I
So the
was
myth
just
is you don't have to earn more money. You just have to pay yourself first.
I was just thinking when you come out of an environment where you're not taught those things, and you haven't had, so when you start earning a few dollars, you start thinking about the things that you never had before, and you start going after them. So how do you help reshape that person's thinking so that they, like you, come out on top instead of always lagging behind because they've spent more than they really could afford to?
Well, one of the things that I think we have to recognize is regardless of the environment you came from, and I know you came from a really tough environment, is that 90% of the population, 9 out of every 10 people, have been taught nothing about money. And it gets even worse. I mean, I don't blame parents. Parents can't teach what they don't know. And teachers certainly can't teach what they've never learned. But where it really gets bad is I've spoken to hundreds of CPAs, and I've asked them, in your program, in your training, in your education, were you taught how to do a personal budget and to teach how your clients to do personal budgets? And 100% of the time, the answer is no. Now, I was certified as a financial planner, and this wasn't a part of my coursework either. So the people the public would turn to for this help aren't taught this information. So I just dug and dug and dug until I found out how to fix it, because it wasn't working for me, and I was certified as a financial planner. The very foundations are not taught. Like I said, financial literacy is not valued in the society. So That's one of the reasons that I wrote my book, is to educate the population and deal with the emotional stuff that's in the way before you provide the tips and techniques. In the same way that, you know, people know how to diet. Let me ask you, LaWanna, do you know what it takes to lose weight? What are the two things most people know?
Commitment and discipline, and I have to personally decide I'm going to change the way that I'm doing things.
And
If I
what are
don't
the
make that,
and what are those two things?
well, one is the first is a commitment.
But
I mean,
well,
if I make a commitment, I'll stick to it. But if I don't, I'm subject to wander off. But if I make the commitment that this is what I'm going to do, then I will stick to it.
yeah, but
Then,
what are you going to commit to? What would you commit to?
well, I'll tell you the truth. Right now, I have a commitment to lose 2 pounds a month.
Okay. And what actions do you take to support that commitment?
Change the way that I have been eating in the past.
Eating.
Everyone who knows me know that I love food.
Okay. And you can
I'm
love
eating
food.
more vegetables now than the desserts that I used to consume.
Okay. So one of those actions is change your eating. What's the second one?
I know I should be walking, and I'm
Okay.
working on that one.
Okay. So there you go. So now I'm going to tell you, every person who's overweight or obese knows these two things. You change your eating and you exercise. But knowing is not enough, because there's emotional issues that come up. And it's the same thing with money. There are emotional things that come up. So the way that I wrote my book was to deal with those emotional things up front. The first third of my book is how to deal with that emotional stuff before I talk about anything else dealing with money.
Mm.
So, you know, I guess that you could call that another myth, is that knowing how to handle money effectively will allow you to create wealth. No, the knowing is nothing. It's the emotional stuff that has to be dealt with first. It's the commitment. It may be having an accountability partner. It may be having a coach. It may be doing these things with a neighbor, a coworker, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's things that have to be put into place. In the same way you made a commitment to lose 2 pounds a month,
Mm-hmm.
who are you? Who knows to hold you accountable to that?
Well, actually, I meet with some other ladies. There's about 6 of us, and we actually weigh ourselves, and we congratulate if we lose, and we say, we'll do better next week if we don't.
Yeah, yeah.
So
You've got a
together.
group. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You got a group with the same goals, who are supporting one another, who want to see you succeed. And that makes such a difference.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the money.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
go ahead.
now, I was just going to say, people always say that, you need money to make money, but based on what you're sharing with us today, that's not necessarily true. But the rich do have a different mindset. Do they think differently?
Yes. Short answer is yes. Yeah, I'll give
What
you.
are some of their secrets then?
Okay, fine. We're going to get into some of those.
Okay.
But first, I want to use a Jim Rohn quote that I think is really appropriate here. Well, I'm going to use two of them. Jim
Uh-huh.
Rohn says, your income will be the average of the 5 people you hang around with most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
which means if you want to up your game, you want to hang around with the people who have upped their game.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that I did.
Okay.
So that Jim Rohn quote is excellent. And the second quote is by Warren Buffett. I mean, there's hardly anyone who doesn't know who Warren Buffett is.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite quotes of his is that he says, of the billionaires I have known, money just brings out the basic traits in them. If they were jerks, before they had money, they were simply jerks with $1 billion. And what that is saying to me is that if you're a good person, if you're a kind person, if you want to help other people and you become rich, you will still be that same person. And the only people who are corrupted by money are the people who were corrupt before they had it.
Good point.
Because I get this all the time from coaches, authors, healers, corporate trainers, and they'll tell me, well, yeah, but if I have a lot of money, that might corrupt me.
Honestly, I've been guilty of saying the same thing when I was younger.
So that's one of the myths, and that's the last myth we're going to talk about. Because so let's talk about the attitudes that the wealthy have. We spoke about one of them already. And one of those attitudes is when they hear familiar information, they ask questions. Another one is that when it comes to making an investment, they look at the big picture first, not the details. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you thought it would be a good idea to buy a house as a piece of rental property. And you walk into the house and you see that the carpet is torn and the paint is peeling and the plumbing is leaking. Would these details turn you off?
Yes.
Okay.
If they would be.
Yeah. And the reality is those details aren't that important. If the big picture is that the house has a solid foundation and it's in a good neighborhood, that's what matters. That's the big picture. Because those details can be fixed easily. But if it's in a bad neighborhood, you can't fix that easily. And that's the big picture.
Good point. Mm-hmm.
So the wealthy look at the big picture first and the details second. They don't ignore the details, but they're not the first thing that is a consideration. And the other part of it is we kind of addressed as a myth about, paying down debts. The focus should not be on paying off your debts first. The focus should be on growing your net worth first. And I'll use myself as an example. When I was 50 and broke, I had credit card debt. All I could do was make the minimum payments. And I'd saved up $18,000, which I could have used to pay off my credit cards. But instead, I used that toward a down payment with 2 other people on a little income producing triplex, 3 units. And we managed that property, we enhanced that property, we re-rented the units. And within about 4 years, we had a $500,000 profit on this triplex. Mm-hmm. And now the advantage with real estate is there's a section of the Internal Revenue Code that says, if you sell something and you buy something similar to what you sold, it's called a like-kind exchange. It's Section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code. You don't have to pay capital gains tax. So a piece of rental property to another piece of rental property, and it could have been an apartment building, it could have been a mobile home park, it could have been, industrial park. That's a like-kind exchange. You don't have to pay the capital gains taxes. So we were able to roll a $500,000 profit tax-free from one apartment building to a larger apartment building. That 3-unit building, we were able to acquire 15 units with our down payment. Wow. So, what I recognized, getting back to the good debt versus bad debt, I borrowed money so that my wife and this realtor, we could buy more apartment buildings. So we went from literally this 3-unit building in 2003 to, 50 units by 2007. So, gosh, that's only 4 years. In 4 years, we went from 3 units to 50 units. Mm. And, getting back to not having money, I didn't have money and I didn't have good credit. But my wife and the realtor had good credit, and that's what we leaned on to get the loans. So that was good debt. And
Mhm.
guess who pays the loans on the apartment buildings?
You do.
Sort of. But the money that I pay it with comes from the tenants who are renting from me.
After you paid yourself first.
You got it. So the
Okay.
tenants make their rent payments. We use that to make the mortgage payments. And there's money left over for us. We pay ourselves first. We create the money to make down payments on more apartment buildings.
It just continues to grow.
Exactly. So that's the other attitude of the wealth, is that you focus on growing your net worth before you focus on paying down your debt.
I wish I had known you a few years ago because when I was downsized out of my job, I thought, okay, what am I going to do now? I got all these bills, and the money I had saved up, I took it and paid those bills. And guess what? I had more bills after that.
That's what happens with credit card debt. I mean, I have been in this business for well over 40 years, and I've seen people who focus on paying off their credit card debt, and something happens and it comes back. And then they pay it down again and something happens and it comes back. And they never get to starting to build their net worth. It's a roller coaster of the debt being paid off and coming back, being paid off and coming back.
It's too bad they don't teach this in school.
No, but like I said, teachers can't teach what they've never learned.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I got a program into 20 high school districts to teach this to students. And when I came back a year later to see how well the program did, I found out none of the teachers used the material. Why do you
Oh,
think that was?
they didn't understand it.
Exactly. They weren't comfortable with it. So I had to teach the teachers so they could teach the students.
Mm. Well,
And, school district doesn't feel that knowing how to handle money is a priority. Only learning how to be an employee is a priority. They don't teach how to be an entrepreneur. They don't teach how to eat properly. They don't teach how to handle money. All the practical skills of life are not what the schools teach.
that's exactly what they did to us when we were in school. I remember I was supposed to be working in a factory, and and I tried the factory and decided it wasn't for me. Yeah, so I never went back to working in a factory. I did do some dishwashing though to get myself going. I actually
Hey,
preferred
I
over
still wash the dishes at home.
so do I, but I preferred that over the factory work. But it taught me the importance of being committed to something. Because I remember, I'm going to share a quick story with you. I was working on this job, and I was the dishwasher, and all employees knew you could not miss work without them knowing about it at least the day before. Well, I went on a date and we got caught in a storm. I couldn't get let them know because we didn't have cell phones in those days. Couldn't let them know that I was going to be late if I got there at all. As it turned out, I ended up being 3 hours late getting to work, but I had a son, so I went to work anyway. And when I walked in, everybody was looking at me, and one girl goes, "You know you're fired, don't you?"
Oh, 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 jeez.
And I said, "Have they replaced me yet?" And she said, "Well, no." And I went and got my apron. I said, "Well, then I'm going to do my job."
Good for you.
Do you know the director came in later that afternoon when he saw what I was doing? He stood there, he looked for a while, he turned, he left. At the end of my shift, he came back. He says, "I'm going to give you your job back, but I'm not paying you for today." So I didn't get paid for that day, but I kept my job.
You
So
got
that was the learning experience that I got from that, and it taught me the value of doing a good job. You know, it's not how much I get paid, it's doing a good job and being of value to what you do, no matter what the job is.
Yeah,
So,
and Robert Kiyosaki says something great in one of his books, and I don't remember which one it was, but it had to do with, he talks about rich dad, poor dad, but taking a job not for the money, but for what you're learning.
mhm,
And you learned a lesson from that situation.
yeah,
And I've always taken that to heart in terms of whatever I'm doing. It's not how much money am I going to earn from it, but what am I going to learn from it?
exactly, exactly. So, and I'm glad that I hit that value. And you mentioned, uh, I've heard people talk about having good values. How does having good values help you?
Well,
Mm,
it's crucial. Um, I talk about, you know, I actually wrote a book recently after my bestseller, and it's called The Attitudes of the Wealthy. And so one of the things I talk about are our attitudes. I mean, it's over 30 attitudes that the wealthy operate by. And probably if I were able to implement all 30 in my life, I'd be a billionaire instead of a multimillionaire. But but the point is, a lot of people think thoughts are powerful. Like uh, I remember when I wanted to lose some weight and I thought jogging would be a good idea. And I set my alarm for 5:30 in the morning, and the alarm went off, and I didn't feel like getting up. I mean, it was cold, it was dark. So I just turned off the alarm, went back to sleep. And what I realized was feelings are far more powerful than thoughts. I mean, feelings are what drive us most of the time. We want to avoid pain or we want to gain pleasure. That's far more powerful than any thought we might have, whether it's about money, whether it's about diet, whether it's about giving up smoking. It doesn't make any difference. So what I realized was, okay, if the feelings are blocking me from the thoughts, what can I lean on that'll be more powerful than the feelings? And that's the values. So one of my values was integrity. And I realized, well, obviously, getting up in the morning on my own is not working. And we already talked about accountability partners and the people who support you. So I went to one of my neighbors. His name is Ron. I knew he went jogging in the morning. And I said, Ron, can I go jogging with you? And he said, yeah, sure. Meet me in front of the house, 6 o'clock. We'll go jogging together. The next morning when the alarm goes off at 5:30, it didn't matter if I didn't feel like it. I got up because I gave someone my word I was going to be there. And I showed up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and Ron and I jogged together for several years. And it went on from, just going a couple blocks before I was out of breath to running marathons. So, small steps can add to large steps, but it starts with knowing your values and using those to lean on.
yes, and that what you said is so true. I'm very careful about giving my word, because to me, that is so important. I will not promise you something if I think there's a possibility I may not be able to do it, unless I tell you I will do this to the best of my ability, but there may be something that caused a delay. I will let them know that possibility, but I will not promise you something if I think that I can't deliver it.
And that's
You know,
operating in integrity. And the reality is, a person's word needs to be their bond. If you can't trust a person's word, you can't trust much else that they're going to tell you.
that's true. True. So, in today's in today's market, would you advise people to invest in stocks?
Oh, right now, it's a fabulous time because it is so frightening. And that leads to another of Warren Buffett's quotes, and that is, be fearful when people are greedy, and be greedy when people are fearful. And right now, people are fearful. The market is going up and down in so many different directions. I don't know when this will be broadcast, but just a couple days ago, oil was at a negative $37 a barrel, and it sold in 1,000-barrel lots, which means if you had a place to store 1,000 barrels of oil, you could be paid $37,000 to take it off someone else's hands.
Wow.
It's just an amazing, bizarre time.
Mm, mm, mm. Wow. I'm ready to go count my pennies and see what I can put together.
Yeah, and where would you store 1,000 barrels of oil? Yeah.
Wow. If only we hear some, well, I know a place I could store it, but I don't, it's not, what is it, cultivated yet? That might be a problem. Okay, so do the concepts in your book work for business owners?
Oh, actually, they work better for business owners than they do for people who are on a paycheck. It also works, obviously, for people on a paycheck. But business owners have more options available to them for reducing their taxes based on what they do and for increasing their income. They're not limited to their boss giving them a promotion or an advancement or increasing their wage or something of that nature. They can make that happen on their own. So actually the concepts in my book work even better for business owners.
Hmm. So if someone wanted a financial planner, how would they go about choosing the right financial planner? Because you see signs all over the place, financial planner. There are some companies, I'm not going to mention anybody's name because, you know,
Yeah, no point
I
to
don't want
that.
to give somebody a bad name when it may not be the case. But how does a layperson know how to get a good financial planner? Because I've heard some horror stories.
Oh, yeah. And that gets back to one of the early things I said about wealthy people ask questions. And if you're going to try and find a financial planner, it's not what they tell you and their marketing and how they tell you how great and wonderful they are and the wonderful things they've done for their clients. The individual has to ask them questions to make sure there is an alignment with what the person needs and with what the financial planner does. As an example, if all the financial planner specializes in is saving people taxes, and what the person needs is how to get started investing, there needs to be a match. They can ask questions like, how do you have an example of the kind of clients that you work with who are in situations similar to me? Or can I see a sample of the kind of financial plan you put together? Or how might your interest and my interest align? So those are important kinds of questions. And that's same thing, any wealthy person would do.
Those are good questions, but the average person doesn't know to ask that type of question. So in your books, do you give them some
Yeah, I do.
examples?
I have the kinds of questions that someone needs to ask.
Okay, that's great because you know I talked to financial planners and it didn't work for me. And I realize now listening to you is because I didn't know the questions I needed to ask. And so therefore it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that you have been very insightful today and you have so much information. I before we go, I was wondering, can you share um uh, you may have said it and maybe I missed it. I hope I didn't, because then that would be bad.
And
But
hopefully I remember.
I was thinking about those three secrets because I heard some of your talk and I had some other things going on, and so I didn't get all of it. But I would, and think somebody else out there in the audience may want to know about those secrets. Can you share with us those three secrets that the wealthy know and the rest of us don't?
Oh, yeah, it's real easy. I use the acronym AFI, which does not stand for the American Film Institute. It stands for those three secrets. And the A stands for attitude. And we've spoken a lot about the attitude. They do have a different attitude than ordinary people. And the F stands for forms, income and expense form, balance sheet, a net worth statement. They're the same forms many of us have already used, but they look at them differently. I mean, they don't, as an example, on a balance sheet, it might say that your house is an asset, but that's not how a wealthy person looks at it, because the house generates expenses. It doesn't generate income. When they look at a balance sheet, they want to see the assets that have the ability to generate an income so they can choose to work or choose not to work. So forms is the second secret in how they look at them. And the last item, I, stands for investments. The wealthy are not limited to stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. There are so many other things that they are invested in, and generally they are in control of their investments. I'm in control of the apartment buildings I own. If I owned a mini storage facility, or if I owned an office building, or I was investing in oil and gas, these are the different kinds of things that a wealthy person invests in. Triple net leases, limited partnerships, so many other things besides stocks, bonds, and mutual funds.
Truly, thank you for sharing that information. And wow, there's so much there. I could probably talk to you for the next 24 hours and still wouldn't get all the information that I would need, you know. Uh, that's wonderful that you took this on. And the fact that you've done yours and now you're giving it away. And you've chosen the shelter to soldier as your primary one that you give money to. Can you tell us something about that?
I'm so glad you asked, because I realized that's the most important thing about what I'm doing. It's not how I support people to create wealth or become philanthropic. What I'm doing is donating 100% of the profits from my work to Shelter to Soldier. And what they're doing is rescuing dogs from high kill environments. And if they have the right personality and size, they're trained as service animals for our soldiers who've come back with PTSD or traumatic brain injuries. And the people who allow us to do what we do in this country, to allow us the freedoms that we have, and putting their lives on the line in other parts of the world, come home and they're not treated like the heroes that they are, and committing suicide at the rate of almost 1 an hour, to me is just not right. And dogs are euthanized by the thousands. And they have a higher purpose in life. And these dogs save lives of veterans who had otherwise committed suicide. Not one who's received their service dog has killed themselves. So that's what I'm doing. I'm donating 100% of the profits from the work I do to this charity, sheltertosoldier.org.
I can appreciate that. Having had three of my sons who went into the military, um, thankfully none of them came back Maine. But you know,
Thank
I'm
goodness.
always in awe and of men and women who are willing to put their lives of what made him decide to go into the service. And he said because he wanted to give back to the country, you know.
And the
And
country needs to give back to them.
As and you know that's what they do every day that they're out there, and it's not just the military, but your policemen and your firemen, these hospital workers. They're not thinking about themselves. They're thinking about us first, because it would be easy for them to say, you know, I'm not going out there. I got a family. I'm not going out there. But that's not how they think. And I am so grateful to them for what they do. So I applaud you for what you're doing. I don't know what I can do to help, but I cut for the dollars I can put out there to help. Every little bit helps, you know. So it's just amazing, what they
Thank
do
you.
and what you're absolutely. So before we go, have you anything that you'd like to offer our audience so that they would have an opportunity to maybe work with you?
Yeah, you know what? If they go to my website, which is wealthonanyincome.com / TEDx, they can actually get two things. One of them is a roadmap so that they can create complete financial choice. And the second thing is they can hear my TEDx talk. And for every like or and view that I get, I'm donating $1 to Shelter to Soldier. So some of the stuff that we've discussed, they'll be in that TEDx talk. It's only 16 minutes long. And all they have to do is go to Shelter to Soldier, go to wealthonanyincome.com / TEDx.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And again, appreciate your being here today. I know you are a busy, busy person, and yet you were willing to work with us despite the technical difficulties. Oh my gosh, this is the first time I've experienced that type of situation, and I have to tell you, I was so embarrassed. But you were so kind and gracious working with me on this. I truly appreciate it, and I am going to have you back because there is so much more I feel that we can learn from you, and I'd like other people to have the opportunity to pick up on that. I know I got some very good information from you today, so. Um, Folks, you've just heard Rennie Gabriel share how to become wealthy. And I hope you were taking excellent notes on what he had to say because it was very important. Not only that, we all need to be thinking about what we want to leave our children. You know, I'm not looking to make a fortune, but I would like to leave my kids $1 or two when I'm gone. So, you know, just something that they can maybe have it grow into something more than what they receive. So uh, we need to listen to people like Rennie because he'll help us get on the right track. So thank you all for being a part of today's show. This is Courage to Live Your Dream, and we are all about helping you and supporting you. And we will have more guests like Rennie come on and share some wonderful tidbits with you that will hopefully help to improve your life and especially your business life so that you grow and become one of those people who will find a worthy cause that you too can champion and have it out there where it helps to take care of others because that's what we're all here for, to support one another and to help each other grow. And I truly appreciate that. And my first gift was to learn how to smile. And what a difference it made when I learned how to smile. Don't worry about him. He has earned his right to be up to bar. So again, folks, until next time, please stay safe and keep the faith.